Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar brought to you by the Nazarian Center for Israel Studies at UCLA. It's also sponsored by the UCLA Center for the Study of Religion and Hillel at UCLA. I'm Dov Waxman, the director of the Nazarian Center and the Rosalind and Arthur Gilbert Foundation Chair of Israel Studies at UCLA. Today is Jerusalem Day, an Israeli national holiday commemorating Israel's capture of East Jerusalem, home to the Old City and its holy sites, in the June 1967 Six-Day War. Jerusalem Day is always a tense occasion in the city, as right-wing Jewish Israelis stage a provocative march through the Damascus Gate of the Old City and through the Muslim Quarter to the Western Wall, the holiest site where Jews can pray. This year's Flag Day March was cancelled at the last minute due to the escalating violence in Jerusalem, including major clashes between Palestinians and Israeli police on the Temple Mount, or the Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, which have left hundreds of Palestinians wounded. And just today, Hamas has fired rockets in the direction of Jerusalem, and Israel has carried out retaliatory attacks in Gaza. The impending eviction of several Palestinian families from their homes in the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah and the protests in that area, as well as previous protests and violent clashes around the Damascus Gate, have fueled the latest flare-up of tensions in Jerusalem and put the international spotlight once again on the city, which has always been the epicenter of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The old city of Jerusalem is filled with sites that are sacred to Jews, Muslims, and Christians all over the world, and it has given the city its unique symbolic significance. But while the religious importance of Jerusalem is obvious and well known, very few people know much about what these religions actually have to say about Jerusalem. Our speaker today is one of those few people. Rabbi Chaim Seidler Fellow was the executive director of the Hillel Center at UCLA for 40 years and is now director emeritus. He is also a lecturer in the departments of sociology and Near Eastern languages and cultures at UCLA and in the Department of Theological Studies at Loyola Marymount University. Rabbi Seidler Fellow was ordained at Yeshiva University, where he completed a master's in rabbinic literature. He'll give his presentation and then we'll do a Q&A, so please do send us your questions. And without any further ado, let me welcome Rabbi Chaim Seidler Fellow.
Thank you, Dov. Thank you very much. I too must acknowledge that today is a day of great tension. The Temple Mount has always been, or for a long time has been a fraught place. And I pray and hope for calm. Some of you may know that the 1929 massacre and in Hebron was initiated in Jerusalem because of a rumor that the Jews were taking over the Temple Mount. So this has been in the air certainly throughout the 20th century, and I will comment about that in a moment. I want to frame the discussion by saying a word about the role of religion, because when we talk about Jerusalem, many people will talk about the holy city. What's the nature of holiness? In Hebrew, it's Kedusha, Kedushat Yerushalayim. That's the critical idea, it seems to me, that we need to mine and understand. Because sanctity is intended ideally from a religious perspective as a control over the political or the arrogant urge to claim it's mine. Because sanctity attributes, if we want to call it ownership or a degree of connection to the divine. And to the extent that sanctity becomes political, it's the human usurping the divine. So that by introducing the notion of sanctity, we really intend to sort of create a sense of tension between the realm of God and the political realm, because when the two intermingle, then religion can easily devolve, or the political size religion, into a sense of chauvinism and absolutism, which produces extremism that we confront. So the question is, can we hold on to Kedusha? can it function in a way of restraint, in a way, in such a manner that the nationalism that's reflected in the people who considers Jerusalem holy can be an inclusive nationalism? Can that be a religious value? I know it's counterintuitive to most of you who see religion as the force for extremism. And I want to complicate this in your mind, because religion is a force for extremism when it becomes political. And you know this from the history of Christianity and of Islam. So it's not distinctive to Judaism. So my strategy for the teaching part is I'm going to use sources. And I'll share my screen with a source packet and read through the sources with you to establish my points. And the basic issues that I want to deal with are, number one, the background in Islam, the Muslim relationship to Jerusalem, because indeed, usually, I think in the Jewish community, we tend to diminish and belittle and discredit Muslim claims. So I think we need some background on this issue, and we need to understand what it is that what has been the Jewish response. And this, so I'll present this with some contemporary, or more or less contemporary, reflection, that is the Jewish response. And then I'm going to move on to classical sources, because that's really where I want to go, both in terms of the differing opinions about permissibility to ascend the Temple Mount, and then to understand, in light of Maimonides' position, what I would call the ongoing spiritualization of the temple, and then reflect on some more even ancient sources about the universal significance of Jerusalem, and think about what that could mean today, and the distinctive nature of the vision that's promoted by the prophets of Israel. Okay, so as I said, let me share my sources and share my screen. All right, so I'm going to actually move to the supplement to the sources. There's a lot here. Okay, so I mentioned before that we have a tendency in our political response to say, well, Jerusalem is a centerpiece of Jewish prayer, it's a center of the Bible, it's our home. All of those things are obviously true. And the connection is extremely deep. And that's why I think I actually I feel a sense of nervousness today as I'm presenting, not simply because it's a presentation that I'm making, but because I feel the tension of what's happening in Jerusalem itself, and live with it. And I think that many of us have that experience. And especially, by the way, what's relevant is that I recall vividly the days in anticipation of the Six-Day War and living through that period, and the sense of redemption that emanated from the victory, and a sigh of relief that we had come out in the way that we did. So it was a trauma. And that's my fear at all times, that we don't want to experience that again. We want to avoid it, and that if somehow our understanding can contribute to a lessening of passion and a rational approach, perhaps we can move beyond the conflict, or the central elements of conflict. Okay. So what is actually Islam's relationship to Jerusalem? Well, it's pretty old. It traces itself back to the origins of Islam. And in this particular passage from the Quran, what I want to illustrate is the fact that that Muhammad began praying towards Jerusalem. And in the Quran, it reports, the ignorant among the people will say, what has turned them away from the direction of prayer they once followed? So in other words, there is an awareness that at some point Muhammad turned away from Jerusalem, turned his back to Jerusalem to face Mecca. And this became a cause of both of a sense of stigmatizing Islam as rejecting Jerusalem and Muhammad as rejecting the Jews, but also, it seems to me, of trying to understand what it is that Muhammad was doing. Why is it that why did he turn his back on Jerusalem? And here he's trying to explain what's going on, and he says to his followers, say, to God belong the east and the west, he guides whom he wills to a straight path. Meaning that whatever direction I turn to, God is in that direction. And if now I turn to another Qibla, in another direction, then that's also the will of God. But it remains very significant that initially Muhammad desired to gain legitimacy on the basis of his prayer towards Jerusalem, because he understood that Jerusalem was a center, was a fount of holiness. And he himself recognized the holiness of Jerusalem as linked to the fact that Solomon's temple stood there, and that ancient site was also the site of Adam and Eve and the binding of Isaac, etc. So that we have a historical association that Muhammad himself relates to. And then he sort of rebuking his followers and the hypocrites among them and so on, but rationalizing this change. Let me say a word about what could have motivated Muhammad. The standard explanation is that the Jews rejected him, and in response to Jewish rejection, he turned away. We actually know the date. I mean, if I can look at my sheet of notes, maybe I'll find it. If not, we'll have to do without it. Today, I think we'll have to do without it. All right, but if maybe someone in the audience can illuminate and tell us what the date is, but that's not that relevant. But that's a standard explanation. It seems to me that a more judicious understanding of Muhammad's decision to turn away is that at some point, as Islam was beginning to grow, there was a need for Islam to sort of distinguish itself. It's sort of like Christianity rejecting the Sabbath on Shabbat and moving it to Sunday. Not because they rejected the Sabbath, but because they wanted to own their own Sabbath. I mean, there is obviously a degree of competition and a pushing aside. And that, of course, exists between Judaism and Islam, and hostility as well, for sure. But it's not the only explanation, and that there is actually an internal Islamic explanation. Now, beyond Muhammad's own prayer direction, we also know that his night vision, which is attributed to his vision where he travels in a dreamlike state from his home to Jerusalem to meet Moses and all the prophets, and thereby within that night vision, Muhammad establishes, I too am among the prophets. We understand again that what he's doing is drawing his legitimacy, drawing significance from his connection to ancient Israel, to the temple as a source of holiness. All right. In Jewish sources, post-Islamic conquest, we see something very interesting. This is a late text called Mistarot Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, The Secrets of Shimon Bar Yochai. This is relevant, of course, unfortunately, to what happened a couple of weeks ago in Meron, the stampede. the grave of the sage, the 2nd century sage Shimon Bar Yochai, to whom is attributed the authorship of the Book of Splendor, the Zohar, the central text of Jewish mysticism. So, of course, it's very fitting that the text, which is a late Midrashic text, and it's called Nistarot, the hidden secrets of Shimon Bar Yochai. So there we have the following account. The second king who will arise from Ishmael. So it's presented as a type of prophecy, but we know that it actually was written after the fact. So the prophecy is accurate to a great extent, because it's reflecting on events that had already occurred. The second king who will arise from Ishmael will be a friend of Israel. He will repair their breaches and fix the breaches of the temple and shape Mount Moriah and make the whole of it a level plain. He will build for himself there a place for prayer, Hishtachavaya, which means prostration, upon the site of the foundation stone. The Even Shtiyah, right, the stone from which the world emerged, the stone from which Muhammad alighted, as Scripture says, and set your nest on the rock. He will wage war with the children of Esau. Children of Esau are the Christians, and slaughter their troops and capture a large number of them. And eventually he will die in peace and with great honor. So the second king that's being referred to here is Omar. And the text, this Jewish text, attributes great honor and respect to Omar as someone who is going to basically reestablish the precincts of the temple, and through his building, through his building, he's going to draw forth the holiness of the place in his refashioning of Jerusalem, so that the entrance of Muslims into Jerusalem was looked upon not as a derogation of the Jews, but on the contrary, as an elevation of the Jews, as an affirmation for the Jews, as a redemptive act away from the oppression of Christianity. And of course, Omar would want to build his major site on the foundation stone, because on that foundation stone was built Solomon's temple. So the sanctity of Omar's shrine draws forth from the Solomonic temple, which is at the foundation. Now, some of you know that and we saw it in the photo that was the opening photo to the presentation, that on the Temple Mount, there's another Islamic structure. It's the Al-Aqsa. Al-Aqsa is related to the Hebrew Hakatzer, the edge, the furthest. That's the visionary, what Muhammad calls the furthest mosque, and it carries with it also great significance and great holiness, having been built on the Temple Mount itself. Now, I know that most of you are familiar with the fact that today it's standard for Palestinians, at least, to deny, that is officially and politically, to deny that the Temple Mount was a site of Solomon's temple. That was not always true. And here I'd like to share with you a brochure in my collection. I have a collection of documents that we're now archiving at UCLA, of posters and ephemera and booklets that have to do with the history of Israel. And this in particular is a brochure that was issued in 1924 by the Waqf. The Waqf is the religious cooperative that controls and still does to this very day, the Temple Mount. And it's a guidebook. It's a brief guidebook. And there the book says, this site is one of the oldest in the world. Its sanctity dates from the earliest, perhaps from prehistoric times. Its identity with the site of Solomon's temple is beyond dispute. It's beyond dispute, except if you're Yasser Arafat talking to Bill Clinton, or if you're someone arguing a case against Israel. And unfortunately, this is what happens to history when it becomes a victim of politics, and people can't think clearly and don't know their own traditions and manipulate their own traditions. But it's very clear now. What's fascinating is that I own a number of these brochures, one from the 30s also, and then one from 1953. The one from 1953 no longer mentions Solomon's temple. And I've seen earlier ones in the 40s, the ones produced in the 40s by the Waqf already omit a reference to Solomon's temple. So this is a clear indication that when the Muslims had to face the reality of the presence of Jews, they began to politicize in order to deny any Jewish rights. And that's unfortunately become part of this confrontation, with each community making claims against the other community, so that it looks, in fact, unresolvable. All right. But what we have is a general sense that Islam has a connection to the Temple Mount. And Rabbi Menachem Fruman, who was the rabbi of Tekoa, meaning of a settlement on the West Bank, writes as follows: the national religious public's concept consists of two very forceful elements: a very realistic, materializing one, the actual settlement of the entire Eretz Yisrael, right, which he holds to be legitimate, and a messianic, spiritual one, objection to entering the Temple Mount. The messianic element is perceived from an Orthodox point of view, waiting silently for the Messiah, not creating a false Messiah by our own hands. The holiness of the Temple Mount is expressed not by barging into it, but rather by withdrawing from it. This is a profound understanding of the nature of holiness. Holiness means restraint. Holiness means not under our control, living with the tension between the reality that we have sovereignty and the dream that we're not yet there. And that, it seems to me, is a distinctive feature of Judaism, being able to live with a sense of deference. It's a deferred history. It's not yet ready. We sit at the Seder table and we pour out Elijah's cup and we don't drink the cup. We understand that how to live with a tension between anticipation and fulfillment. I call that living as an adult. The incapacity to maintain that tension and to barge through mean that we allow the very generative idea of messianism to explode in a political mode, and then it becomes destructive and dangerous. And that's what we have to fear. And among the explicit statements of that politicization is that by Moshe Feiglin. Some of you are familiar with him as a contemporary Israeli politician. He says as follows: listen to him, because he's honest. It's not a religious thing, meaning our desire to ascend to the Temple Mount, to control the Temple Mount, is not a religious thing. Moshe Dayan made a mistake. You know what Moshe Dayan famously said? He said he doesn't want another Vatican. Moshe Dayan intuitively understood the dangers of sanctity, and he wanted to stay away from it because he understood how it can wreak havoc. All right, so Feiglin rejects the Dayan stance. It's not a religious thing. It's about sovereignty. We are here on the Temple Mount on a national mission. Every Jew that goes up the mountain, every single Jewish foot stubbornly ascending the Temple Mount, reclaims Israel's sovereignty, not only on the mountain, but for our own land. The menorah, symbol of the state of Israel, will return in our day to illuminate our temple, God willing. So rather than maintain a distinction between power and sovereignty and holiness, so Feiglin decides that he's going to collapse them. Now, I want you to see something, understand something rational. Power and sovereignty are ephemeral, meaning here today, gone tomorrow. In the history of humanity, different powers have faded from history, one after another. The religious notion of sanctity is something that's eternal. It's something that's spiritual. It's something that lives beyond time. I'm stressing this because I think there's been a failure in general religious education, and that in American politics, you know, the holy and the profane have been intermingled in a way that's also been extremely, extremely damaging. Now, I want to move from here. We're going to come back to some of these sources, I hope, and I want to share with you aspects of the tradition. First of all, in 1925, this is also in my collection, it hangs on the wall of Hillel, is an announcement, a declaration, a hachrazah, a proclamation by Rabbi Kook, who was then the chief rabbi of Palestine, which is a public warning that it's strictly forbidden to enter the temple area. So this was the regnant opinion throughout the at least 1,000 years of Jewish history, from the Maimonides to this very day, that it's prohibited for Jews to ascend the Temple Mount because we don't know the location of the Holy of Holies, and we're not spiritually prepared. That means we haven't purified ourselves in the manner that's appropriate and required in order to enter the temple precincts. But I think they're actually much more, they're deeper thinkers than we are, because by asserting this prohibition, what they were really trying to avoid was the passion that emerges when you rekindle the hopes of rebuilding the temple. And throughout the last 1,000 years, they've restrained themselves. In fact, I could actually make the argument, because already in the 3rd century, there's a Talmudic rabbi who says that prayer is superior to sacrifice. So it means that by the 3rd century, the rabbis understood that even though the destruction of the temple was a crisis and a tragedy and almost undid Judaism, nevertheless, we were able to reconstruct a Judaism that in some ways is more profound, which relies on the people and not on the priests, which relies on study and reason and not on revelation. It's a radical transformation that allowed Judaism to survive. So let's be careful about how soon we want to break through into the holy precincts and reestablish what we've learned to live without. That's the point. All the time in our history that we learned to live without it. So there was no, where we didn't make any claims, we somehow managed. We managed, and there was no opposition, and the Muslims actually recognized our right. It's Solomon's temple. It's only when we politicize it that then the conflict arises on both sides. Now, I say the conflict arises on both sides because in 2014, and I'm sorry that I don't have an English translation, a group of rabbis published an advertisement in the local Israeli newspapers arguing that people should make an effort to ascend the Temple Mount. Now, this is significant, and I can't go through all the rabbis, but I think that some of them are familiar to you. Harav Shlomo Riskin, Rabbi Riskin was an American rabbi. He's the founder of Efrat. He's my friend and my teacher. Rabbi Rabinowitz, who passed away this year, who's the teacher of Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of the British Commonwealth. I don't know, the United Kingdom, now the British Commonwealth. Harav Yaakov Meidan, who's the head of the yeshiva in Alon Shvut in Gush Etzion, a very, very popular yeshiva, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, in other words, I'm familiar with many of these rabbis. They're significant religious Zionist rabbis, and all of them are advocating the ascent to the Temple Mount. And I want to say a word about that. The use of the Hebrew word aliyah to the Temple Mount is a word that is loaded. It's a way of asserting that the political act, because Feiglin identifies it. He says it explicitly. We're going to the Temple Mount because it's a way of establishing Jewish sovereignty in the whole land. It all depends on aliyah to the Temple Mount. So the rabbis are now playing dangerously with a religious term, aliyah, ascent, identifying it with aliyah to the Temple Mount, whereas classically, in the classical sources, the term that's used is Knisa Lahar Habayit, entering the Temple Mount precincts, not aliyah. The use of aliyah is a purposeful term to try to link the Temple Mount with the establishment of sovereignty in the state of Israel. Now, what's the background for these teachings and for this argument? So it's a basic argument, and here I'm going to move a little more quickly between Maimonides. Here's the Maimonides text in English, and and Rabbi Abraham ibn Daud. All right. So I might say, by the way, I forgot to mention, in terms of the prohibition of ascending the Temple Mount, Rabbi Israel Meir Kagan, who was known as the Chafetz Chaim and the most important Jewish decisor in the early 20th century from Eastern Europe, wrote, "Hanechnas atal makom hamikdash chayav mita." The person who enters the temple precincts today is liable to the death penalty. So clearly doesn't look kindly upon those who break through, right? But those who break through have their reasons. Obviously, they have their reasons. Now, with Maimonides, let's just read the first paragraph. We don't have time to go through it all. He says, any place which was not consecrated with all the above elements and according to the above procedure is not thoroughly consecrated. Though Ezra offered 2 thanksgiving offerings to dedicate the city, he merely carried out a testimonial act. He's talking about the second, there are 2 moments of sanctification of the land, of consecration, one by Joshua, who conquered the land, and one by Ezra, who resettled the land. The sanctuary, and this is the point, the sanctuary was not consecrated through Ezra's deeds, for neither a king nor the Urim the Tumim were present there. If so, how was the second temple consecrated? This is what I want you to see. With the first consecration performed by Solomon, for he consecrated the temple courtyard and Jerusalem for that time and for eternity. This is the relevant line. In other words, according to Maimonides, the sanctity of the temple precincts date back to Solomon. They don't date back to the first sanctification of Joshua, because Joshua established the sanctification through conquest. Conquest is ephemeral. Here today, gone tomorrow. It's about power. That's why Maimonides has to stress that the first sanctification of the temple, which is distinctive and remains, even though according to his understanding, the rest of the land of Israel doesn't carry sanctification any longer, right? The temple and Jerusalem do, because it was sanctified by Solomon. Now, 2 points about that. Number one, Solomon's sanctification as presented in the Bible has to do with God, because a fire descended from heaven onto the altar to give the sign that this was the temple, and the sacrifices will burn. We have the same story in the book of Maccabees. I mean, it's a classic motif that you see in religious traditions. And secondly, Maimonides makes the claim that the sanctification, in the final paragraph here, that the sanctification of the temple is eternal, because it's not the sanctification by the people, but by the Shekhinah, and that the Shekhinah, God's presence, is eternally there. Now, this is a very difficult assertion by Maimonides. Unfortunately, we don't have time to deal with it, because Maimonides' project is to de-essentialize the world of creation. The only essential, the only essence, is the divine. Nothing else is essentially holy. Everything else is functionally holy. It's an instrument of holiness. Now, he does attribute holiness here that's forever, that seems to be eternal, right? It's eternal to the temple. But again, that's why I think he's very careful. And it has to do with as he writes, it has to do with the Shekhinah, with the divine presence. And I want to share with you what Menachem Kellner, who teaches philosophy now in Jerusalem, who was a professor at Haifa for many years, writes as follows. Shekhinah is a metaphor for human striving to come closer to God through understanding. So think of Maimonides, the philosopher. Why is the temple sacred? Because the temple place has some sort of special status as a place where it's possible symbolically to come closer to God. And that's what the nature of its sanctity is. But the building itself is an instrument, right? And that's consistent with the general Maimonidean way of thinking. But the Temple Mount carries on this notion of holiness because of its presence, because of a sense of the presence, capital P presence. All right, as against Maimonides, writes his interlocutor, Abraham ibn Daud, who writes, the ruling derives from his own reasoning. This is Maimonides made this up, and I know not where it comes from, according to the view that this first sanctification was not meant to be forever. There is no distinction between the temple and Jerusalem and the rest of the land of Israel. So what's he talking about? How could it be that the temple is sanctified and the rest of the land of Israel is not, according to Maimonides? Moreover, I say that even according to Rabbi Yossi, who said that the second sanctification was meant to be forever, he only said this regarding the rest of the land of Israel, but regarding Jerusalem and the temple, he did not say it. For Ezra knew that the temple in Jerusalem would change in the future and be sanctified by another eternal sanctification with the glory of God forever. I'm sorry, we can't reason through every statement, but I want you to see the last comment that Ravad makes. Thus it was revealed to me, God's mystery to those who fear him. Therefore, one who enters there, the temple site today, is not liable for excision. All right. So what the Ravad argues, the Ravad is a mystic against Maimonides' rationalism. He said that he knows, because he learned this through a revelation, that Ezra knew that the temple would change in the future and be sanctified by another eternal sanctification. He's talking about the Messianic times. So to Ravad, the Messianic times are a time of the re-sanctification of the temple. But and the Temple Mount, until that time, the Temple Mount is not a place of sanctity. All right. And I just to point out in a mode of reasoning that Ibn Daud, who ridicules or who pokes at Rambam because he says he made it up, his own halacha. So his mode of reasoning is that it was a revelation. So I think you should smile, a little bit smile, and see how they're arguing with one another and understand the flaws in the nature of Ibn Daud's argument. Nevertheless, we have these two opinions. So there is the Maimonides opinion, and religious literature is filled with arguments and justifications, and is it appropriate to go up to the Temple Mount, basically prohibiting, and Ibn Daud permitting, and so there you have the lines are drawn. All right. Now, I'm going to move on, and I'm going to move on because I want you to see something central to Maimonides. This text here, he writes as follows in his Laws of Prayer. He says, anyone outside Palestine turns his face towards the land of Israel and recites the prayer. One who is in the Holy Land turns towards Jerusalem. One who is in Jerusalem turned towards the temple. If one is in the temple, he turns towards the Holy of Holies. A person who is either blind or unable to determine the right direction or is on a ship directs his heart to the divine presence and praise. Now, we haven't learned through the passage in the Talmud. It's, I think, source number 6. If we had learned through the passage in the Talmud that Maimonides is utilizing, you would see that he switches the place of the blind person from the first place in the Talmud to the last place in his presentation, because he's making a constructive argument. It's a gradual argument building on the notion of holiness, and the thrust of his presentation is that the ultimate holiness, beyond directing one's face to the Holy of Holies, which is the holiest place, is directing one's heart. So Maimonides made the move. That's what he's telling us. The temple is a spiritual place. It's not the physical representation of the temple is a symbol to get you to direct yourself, to understand the potential that humans have to link themselves to the divine. And so too, by the way, you see in the Torah, in the Bible, we move from Exodus, which says, I will dwell amongst you in Exodus, to Deuteronomy, where it says, my name will dwell amongst you, which is an abstraction and what we would call the general spiritualization, to hear the culmination in the thinking of Rebbe Chaim of Volozhin, the student of the Gaon of Vilna, who says that building the tabernacle in the desert was an exercise in people learning that they can construct holiness within their own being. So the temple, as all religious elements is a symbolic structure whose force it is to teach us how to direct ourselves inwardly, rather than teach us how to use the temple presence as a vehicle, as an instrument against others, and make claims that we control, that we're in charge, that we dominate. That's a desecration, according to this mode of thinking, of the force of the temple. Now, I have another few minutes, and I want to bring it to a close. So, I intended to show you, but I'm not going to take the time. Let me just mention it. This idea of sanctification, of the fact that the temple is spiritual, is carried out in medieval Spain in the fact that the Bibles in medieval Spain, the illuminated Bibles, all had images of the temple vessels. And the Bibles were called Mikdash Yah. And that's a secret of Jewish survival. The community in Spain was facing decimation and persecution, but it understood that even without a physical home, even without sovereignty, even without a temple, we've learned how to survive because our book carries us through. Our book is our Mikdash Yah. It's the sanctuary of God. Right? And therefore, the implements of the temple are depicted in the illuminated manuscripts that were written in the 14th. I have some pictures of them. I have a facsimile of the Kennicott Bible in my collection, a magnificent representation of the temple vessels. And that's all about our capacity to meditate on the temple vessels and understand our spiritual connection through the images themselves. Now, beyond this notion of Jerusalem, the spiritual Jerusalem, and inwardness, we see the Bible making a statement about what's Jerusalem all about. Jerusalem is, we have in Isaiah, and we have numerous quotations, and I've only brought you one, right? Alas, she has become a harlot, the faithful city that was filled with justice. Jerusalem is Ir HaTzedek, Tzedek Yalim Ba, the king who greets Abraham from Shalem, we're going to see this in a moment, is Malki Tzedek, the king of justice. So Jerusalem is seen as a city that emanates, that brings forth universal justice. Jeremiah says so. Isaiah says so. The commentary says so. When Joshua comes to the land and comes to Yavuz, to the city which later is called Jerusalem, the king is Adoni Tzedek. So Tzedek, right justice, is at the heart of the Jerusalem project. All right. Now, in bringing ourselves to conclusion, I have two more teachings that I want to share with you. One is this wonderful midrash. There's a midrash in Bereshit Rabbah. I'll read it. And Abraham called the name of the place Hashem Yireh. When Abraham finished the sacrifice of the Akedah, meaning the binding of Isaac, on Mount Moriah, he named it Hashem Yireh, God will see. Abraham called it Yireh, will show. And Abraham called the name of that place Hashem Yireh, just repeats. Shem called it Shalem. Shem, here he means Shem, one of the children of Adam. He's referring to Malki Tzedek. And Malki Tzedek, king of Shalem. Said the Holy One, blessed be he. If I call it Yireh, if I call it by the name that Abraham gave it, which is will show, will see, as did Abraham, Shem, a righteous man, will complain, because he's also devoted to me, and he is a pre-Abrahamic monotheist. And if I call it Shalem, which is what Shem, Malki Tzedek, is the king of Shalem, the descendant of Shem, as did Shem, Abraham, a righteous man, will complain. Therefore, says God, I shall therefore call it, as both of them call it, Yerushalem. It's Yerushalem because it's the city of Abraham and of Malki Tzedek. Malki Tzedek, as I said, a pre-Abrahamic monotheist. So the name links of Jerusalem, Jerusalem's origin, is linked in Jewish tradition to someone who's not even connected in any way with as a Jewish ancestor. So there's a sense of Jerusalem as all-encompassing, as inclusive, as Micah envisions. This is a distinctive vision that emerges out of the prophets of Israel. And remember that Ben-Gurion made sure to write in the Declaration of Independence that the justice, that the rule, the law of the land of Israel, of the state of Israel, will draw forth from the vision of the prophets of Israel, who writes, Micah, quoting Isaiah, thus God will judge among the many peoples and arbitrate for the multitude of nations, however distant, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not take up sword against nation. So he's quoting Isaiah. They shall never again know war, but every person shall sit under his grapevine, etc., etc. Though all the peoples walk each in the names of its gods, we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever. So we're going to walk side by side in messianic times with the people of the other nations towards Jerusalem, which, by the way, which Isaiah says will be a home to Bnei HaNechar, to the children of the other peoples, because it's a universal city. We're going to walk arm in arm, shoulder to shoulder. They will continue to pray in their religious tradition, and we will pray to our God. But we will all know that we're praying to the one God, because we're united by a sense of that oneness that will carry us on together. So there is a long-standing tradition in Judaism, it seems to me, from the Talmud, that is from the Midrash, through the prophets, or from the prophets, through the Talmud, to Rabbi Hershenson, whom I'm not able to share with you today, that the special quality of Jerusalem as a reflection of the distinctive vision of the Jewish people that sees itself not as a people that's separate from the world, but as one that maintains its particularity together with the universal vision. And that we imagine that we're able to promote a distinctive way of looking at the world, where it's not all about us and it's not ours, but that there's a way of sharing in order to bring people together at the same time that we feel fulfilled by our connection historically to a place that means so much to us. I'd like to conclude in the final moment with a little bit of a warning, if I can. So this is a poem that was printed recently in a volume of poetry called Mashiv HaRuach, and it's a creative poetry and spiritual poetic reflection. And the writer writes as follows: Lama hifnetim oref liyavne. Why have you turned your back to Yavne? He writes to his people. V'chazartem lekan lishpoch dam el ahar. Yochanan ben Zakkai left Jerusalem and built a culture that's founded on reason and founded on rabbinic teachings. And you have rejected Yochanan ben Zakkai and returned here to make claims of sovereignty. Ke'ilu alfei tzonu bakar lo hispiku, as if thousands of slaughtered sheep and sacrifices in the temple were not sufficient. Ke'ilu Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai miyutar, as if Yochanan ben Zakkai is superfluous, and the fact that he saved Judaism with his appeal to Vespasian. The Shema Nasanu kol zot hakapayim. Why did we carry all this? Why did we create all this? Why did we build this people for 2,000 years with a vision, with a distinctive vision, with a way of looking at the world that we want to carry and somehow reflect to others? Tfilot, lamdanut, gemilut chasadim, Torah, right? Lamdanut, avodah, ugmilut chasadim. Most of you will know that from Pirkei Avot. This is our distinctive mode of living that we carry with us. Eich yardu nimtarim shel bracha. Eich yerdu nimtarim shel bracha mishamayim. How will the rains continue to pour forth from heavens? Means the creativity, the thoughtful creativity of our people. In bagai shuvolim korbanot yiladim. If in the valley our children are continued to be sacrificed. Im hadam shuv zoreim kan. If the blood is once again still pouring forth here, ve'ein lo socher, and there's no dam, u'marveh adama rumusa kemo chatzer, and the ground is saturated, trampled like a courtyard. So the choice is before us. Can we maintain the distinction between our sovereignty and holiness? Can we understand the sense of restraint that religion might introduce? Or are we going to allow those categories to collapse and with that introduce a danger that unfortunately we don't know where it's going to end? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. I can speak, I'm sure, for everybody listening, that your words, your message today of all days is so important and so timely. We've seen religious chauvinism and ultranationalism on display in recent days and weeks. And I think your message about what the religious sources say, what Judaism has to say about the Temple Mount is a particularly important message today. So thank you for that. We've had a lot of questions come in. First of all, quite a few of our listeners would like to get the source sheet that you're using. So would it be possible to
send it today? I think you should have a copy in the office because I sent it ahead. Or I
Okay,
can.
so what we'll do is we'll post it on our website, on the website of the Nazarian Center, and you can download that source sheet from our website. So we'll try and get that up today or tomorrow. So please look out for that, and that will be on our website. So let me begin, first of all. I'm going to try and turn to as many questions as I can, but I want to, first of all, begin with a general question. You, I think, very powerfully, very eloquently convey the universalist, the spiritual understanding that within Judaism, this religious tradition that de-emphasizes place, that de-emphasizes buildings, and focuses rather on spirituality and on prayer and on the connection and on seeking out the divine spirit. But so when we look at what's happening in Israel today, and when we look at, and you mentioned, you provided the advert from these leading rabbis calling for Jews to ascend the Temple Mount. So should we understand that as something that is contrary to the Jewish religious tradition, as something that is a kind of usurpation, a nationalist takeover, perhaps, or politicization of it? Or is there another religious tradition, an alternative one that in fact these other rabbis are drawing upon, that emphasizes the land, these specific sites, and Jewish control over them? So I wonder if you could talk a little about the counter religious tradition to the one you've discussed.
All right. So I think, well, all right. There are three roads that I want to take here. Number one, for sure, we are witnessing and have been witnessing the nationalization of religion. Right. So that's for sure, and that there are elements of that are evident in many different ways and have been for a long time. But I must say that my teacher, David Hartman, made the claim that one of the strengths and one of the functions of a Jewish state will be potentially to normalize religion. So that's the question. Because religion, by nature, can tend to zealotry and to passion, and normalization, which means control, is not natural to the religious personality. I mean, look at myself. I mean, as I express myself, I mean, it sort of fills me with emotion. But Hartman had a great insight, which unfortunately, it seems to me, is not the direction that's being followed. But in the early years, you saw this in the Kibbutz Hadati, the religious kibbutz movement in Israel, which was socialist, and where kibbutzniks, religious kibbutzniks, looked no different, except maybe they're wearing a very small kippah, than what so-called secular kibbutzniks. They were Israelis. They served the army. They had the values of an Israeli. And he saw that as one of the great achievements of a nation state, because what it does is it compels all its citizens to act in what he called a normal way. In other words, to be a religious Jew in Israel, you don't have to put on a black jacket, right? Because it's Israel. So that's that, and I still think that that's one of the expressions of Zionism that I really, that I laud. It also, by the way, this normalization, it seems to me, is expressed in the fact that secularism has a home in Israel in ways in which it doesn't as comfortably in the diaspora to sustain Jewish life. So that's the normal tendency. The problem is, and Gershom Scholem wrote a lot about this, and that's where I think that's the rub, that when the religious idea of a state is linked to the messianic vision as presented by the prophets, that's where trouble is introduced. And the most significant religious thinker in Israel in the 20th century was Rabbi Kook. Even though in the early years before the 1967 war, his teachings were not as influential, but certainly after 1967, his son and the settlers after them pushed religion in this direction to the point that it's almost sort of universally absorbed both what we call the modern Orthodox, the religious Zionists, and the Haredim today, who are nouveau nationalists in their extremism and have bought into this, into some of this vision. The rabbis who signed the advertisement, who are modern Orthodox rabbis, so-called modern Orthodox rabbis, were motivated by a messianic impulse, and that, I'm sorry I didn't bring the quote from Gershom Scholem, but that he feared all his life that would cause that would undermine the potential for Zionism to succeed, because it would be eaten up by the passion, by the religious passion. But in answer to your question, there are three possibilities. One is what I call nationalism, the nationalization of religion, which occurs, by the way, all over the world, right? And so that's partly responsible. The other, the Hartman approach, normalization, where religious people don't have to buy into this absolutism and push. We have to go up to the Temple Mount. We have to do all these things, and a sense of restraint, and the messianic, which sort of shoves us ahead in a way in which is extremely dangerous. And I think that we see that the group that marches through Jerusalem on Yom Yerushalayim is in fact a group motivated very much by a messianic impulse. And I'm sorry for going on this. It's very difficult to counter. Messianism is a distinctive, unique contribution to culture. It has to do with the fact that we hope that history can change. The problem is when we identify political events with ultimacy. Political events are just that. They're political events. They occur, they pass, and then we get on to the next political event. Ultimacy is only, again, I come back, it's God's realm. So the messianic idea has been responsible in some ways for our hope. It's responsible for the capacity of Jews to build up after destruction and say, it's not finished yet, we have more that we can do. So it's not always, it need not be destructive. It's just explosive. And that's the problem, how to control that explosive aspect.
So I wonder, is there any, in Israel today, or among rabbis, particularly prominent rabbis in Israel, is there a move at all toward this, reclaiming this understanding that you presented? I mean, you talked about the rise of this kind of messianic thinking, the impact of nationalism. Is there, I know you already cited the late Rabbi Menachem Froman, but are there other, is there a tendency, do you see any tendency emerging to present this alternative, this counter view that you've offered?
Okay. Unfortunately, it's a move that is embraced by few, but it was the ideology of a very important religious thinker, Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein, the son-in-law of Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, who was the head of the yeshiva in Gush Etzion. And even though the Gush, some would say, is in the West Bank, nevertheless, I mean, he was a moderate voice. He was the only one who criticized his fellow rabbis and heads of yeshivot who told their students to defy the commands of their officers when they had to remove settlers from Gaza and from many other places. He came out very powerfully. Came out powerfully against Baruch Goldstein. In other words, he stood for justice. He stood for tzedek. He stood for values, and he stood for a more rational approach, and rejected the fantasies. I mean, there's a type of fantasy world that attaches itself to messianic visions. That's part of the problem, because it gets completely out of hand. But he faced enormous criticism because he was in many ways, he and his partner, Rabbi Amital, were lone voices, and Rabbi Amital served in a labor government. He then was a founder of a religious party called Meimad, which disappeared. Nobody even knows what it was, but Meimad represents this very view that you're trying to look for. So it's not necessary that the Messianism be the only representation. It's just that it's partly a function of the religious school system and the fact that Rabbi Kook has risen in status to be so central that everybody thinks that Rabbi Kook's version is what religious Zionism is all about. In fact, it was a version of religious Zionism. The founder of religious Zionism certainly didn't think that Zionism was a messianic movement. That's Rabbi Reines. In fact, he was willing to accept the proposal for what do you call it, for Uganda in its time. I mean, it was a mistake on his part, but anyway, it shows you his reasoning was he wanted to save Jews. He didn't want to save. He didn't want to bring about the redemption of the land. That. I mean, I didn't say this before, but that needs to be understood as a central argument. Are we in the business of building the state of Israel because we want to redeem the land? Anu banu arza livnot, yes. Ulehi banot ba. That means for us to be rebuilt in it. It's about the people. And it's not ultimately that. I mean, that has to be the goal, that the people are going to be built. Jonathan Sachs said once that Zionism had two goals. The first goal was to establish a state. That's livnot. All right. And he said we did that very successfully. Then the second goal is to create a moral society, a just society. And he said we're still working on that one. So that's the project. Can we work on it? And can religion, I mean, the question is, can religion be a force for building the moral society? Or does religion align itself with everything that's opposed to what we call universal morality? That's a real problem for religious teachers. And it seems to me for religion of the world today. And the judgment, and you see the judgment that a lot of young people make and others about the nature of religion, how it functions in society.
So we have a few questions specifically about the Temple Mount. One concerns this shift, and you outlined very clearly how traditionally Jews were forbidden from entering the Temple Mount because it was the place of the Holy of Holies. And yet, in recent years, that ruling has been rescinded. Leading rabbis, as well as chief rabbi, have said it is permissible. What explains the shift? I know one factor, perhaps you can mention, talk about, is the ability now for sensors to actually apparently detect where in the ruins of the temple was the Holy of Holies. And so, now supposedly religious Jews can walk around the area without entering that area because they are now better able to know exactly where the Holy of Holies is. Is it a question of new archaeological methods, or what are the theological arguments made to now justify this ascension, or rather entering the Holy of Holies or the Temple Mount?
Right. So first of all, I should, if I might say, the ruling was never rescinded. In fact, in 1968, I have that in my possession as well. The ruling of the rabbinate in 1968 was to sustain Rabbi Kook's prohibition. It's just a counter ruling. In other words, as far as many Haredi rabbis, I think, would adhere to this, they still carry on with this tradition of prohibition. That was traditional. Now, the driving force, you asked me, what's the driving force? The driving force is a combination of nationalism and messianism. I know that doesn't sound like religious terminology, but even before that, underlying that is the threat of Muslims. See, there's a death dance that both communities seem to be engaged in. You say this, I say this, and from a certain perspective, as I look on, I laugh at both of them. In other words, what are they saying? This one says something ridiculous. They say that it's not the site of Solomon's temple, so we have to come back with something of our own to make our claim. It's 3,000 years old. Who knows? Who can say that Jerusalem is 3,000 years old? We don't know that. We don't have any real evidence that that's the case. I mean, we have a tradition. I mean, and I always say to myself, we have to be a little bit modest. That's a tradition that we teach ourselves. It's not something that should be advertised on the international stage because it's irrelevant to everybody else except for us. I mean, God's promise was to us, not to anybody else. So God's promise motivates me to go to the land and to feel a connection to Israel. It doesn't motivate anybody else, and it shouldn't motivate anybody else. It's about learning how to maintain those distinctions. So one factor obviously is this tit for tat and historical tension that arises when one community becomes more powerful than the other community, and there's an undermining assertion. But apart from that, there's all this buildup. The 6-Day War unleashed a sense. I myself remember this. The day I experienced the trauma, as I said earlier, of an anticipation that the 6-Day War may bring a catastrophe. And then I remember I was up all night. I happened to hear the news at 3 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning, June 6th, and to hear the fact that Israel was being attacked, and we went as yeshiva students and demonstrated at the United Nations, and then we heard Abba Eban speak, and it was almost as if the Messiah had come. And I remember the day after the war, I actually called Rabbi Riskin, who was my teacher, and I said, "Tell me, Shlomo, is the Mashiach coming?" I mean, this is me, Chaim. I'm a college student, and I was filled with a sense that something transformative had occurred to the Jewish people until 1973, and people said, "What happened? God loved us in 1967. He doesn't love us anymore in 1973." And there was, some questions that were being asked. But so what I'm saying, since 1967, there's been a buildup and an expectation that there's something that an event had occurred that we need to be able to utilize, to exploit, and that's how the religious writers and thinkers have written about it, who push this this messianic perspective. God knocked on our door. To quote one of Soloveitchik's essays, we have to let him in. And it's our obligation to do so. So there's a sort of newfound energy, and especially in light of the departure from Gaza and the threat that the movement is in decline, there was the need to reestablish the primacy of and centrality of the settlements, the threat of a peace plan and two states. That this plan that was proposed by the by the last American government, which everybody thought was so favorable to Israel, the settlers rejected it because it suggested that there might be a small Palestinian state. They can't have it. It violates the vision that emerged as a central vision, and it's at this, sort of at the heart of their thinking from 1967. So that's what it seems to me what's driving them. They don't want to lose it, and they don't want to lose the opportunity. And they have a government, or they had a government that was sympathetic to their efforts.
We have a question also pertaining to the Temple Mount from Christy Bradford, who asks, if it's a symbol of closeness to God, is also part of the kind of struggle for control or sovereignty over the Temple Mount seen, at least among some religious Zionists, as indicative of which religion is most favored by God, or which is seen as the legitimate religion? In other words, does the demand for control and the ability to manifest that control or that sovereignty over the state, is that somehow connected to this claim that this shows that Judaism is superior to Islam or and to other?
That's a very interesting point. First of all, there would be those who would say that to allow even the current situation, which allows the Waqf to have dominion over the Temple Mount, is a desecration. We have sovereignty. How can we back away from God's place? So there is, if we grant it to them, then what we're doing is we're diminishing, in fact, our sense of loyalty to God. And I guess, it's a very good point that we don't want to fall back into what's classically has been the sense of replacement, where one religion comes to replace another. And by asserting itself over our holy site, there is, in fact, maybe in the Islamic world, maybe that's part of the explanation for Iran and the importance of Al-Quds. Al-Quds, by the way, the Arabic word for Jerusalem, Quds is Kadosh, the holy city. The person who controls Jerusalem is sort of in control of holiness, and of God's God's sense of chosenness and being I think it's an interesting insight, and it psychologically it makes a degree of sense. Yes, unfortunately, it does.
So we just have time for one last question, and this comes from Omar Huda, who I believe you know. He taught Abrahamic religions at UCLA with George Gross.
Yes.
He asks, and this is a broader question about, and I know you haven't discussed this, what's been happening in Sheikh Jarrah, in the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem. But the escalating tensions in general in Jerusalem right now. Is this, in your view, about the attempt to remove or expel Palestinians from these neighborhoods, from these areas? Is it related in any way to religion, or is it really about just trying to remove Palestinians, in these cases Palestinian families who live in Sheikh Jarrah? One thing I would note, of course, is that Sheikh Jarrah is also the site of or believed to be the tomb of Shimon Tzaddik. So there's also a religious dimension, ostensibly a religious dimension to this struggle for control over the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah. If you could say something about that, if you're willing to kind of put this into this broader context.
First, I must say I don't know that I have any special wisdom on that issue, but I do think, what you pointed out is correct, is important, that Sheikh Jarrah is also the locus of the burial of a righteous sage, and therefore people have connected significance to it. But it needs to be seen as part of a general project, which is that the attempt by, first of all, the properties were owned by Jews before 1948, and we know that. So there is a property dimension, a property dispute. However, the attempt to sort of limit it in that way by the court, to see it in those terms and narrow it, is not being fully honest, it seems to me. It's disingenuous, because it's part of a larger conflict, and that's the Judaization of East Jerusalem, and the legitimacy of that from a certain perspective. The argument can be made. The Jordanians controlled East Jerusalem, and what they did was they emptied it out of Jews, and they destroyed Jewish prayer places. We're not going to let that happen again. We're in control, and I want people to sort of remember the words of Matka Gur when the Israeli forces in 1967 reached the Temple Mount. Is Har Habayit Biadenu. The Temple Mount is in our hands. What did he mean by that? He was a military person. But that speaks volumes. It means, we've conquered this now. And this is our capital. What conquering people do you know of in history that compromises on its capital city, where it feels threatened from within? How can we allow that to persist? I think I understand that. But honestly, I'm not personally not sympathetic to that position, because of the political mayhem that it generates, and because I read the poem says it all. The blood that's spilled. Are stones worth the blood that will be spilled. I mean, having said some critical words about Rabbi Kook, I think it's worthwhile maybe ending with a line from his writing where which is memorialized in a song, where he says, Yesh anashim im lev shel even. There are human beings with a heart of stone. Ve'yesh avanim im lev adam. And there are stones with a heart of human beings. So it seems to me that we have to look for the human heart in the stones, and that the purpose of Jerusalem is to give life to people. The reason that the temple is defiled by death is because the temple is a source of life-giving energy and the presence of the life-giving force in the world. And to bring death into the temple precincts, and one of my Talmudic passages that I didn't get to in the readings talks about the passion that can result from being close to the holy, even involving murder by priests of another priest to get there first. Right? And you understand that. I mean, it's a metaphor for what's going on here. Who's going to control the holy? And then who is mighty? Who is superior? And we've spent 1,000 years, I don't know how many, and 2,000 years with Christianity. Hopefully we learned, or they learned, that claiming to be mighty only causes more suffering and doesn't in any way bring about honor or closeness to the divine. So perhaps people will begin to learn that closeness to the divine is going to be generated by a furthering of the idea that all human beings are created in God's image. And that Jerusalem then, as a center of that teaching, can perhaps be a source of light to the world, hopefully speedily in our days, as they say. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's the very, very fitting end to what's been a really fascinating, really important lecture on this day of all days. And we're very grateful to you for sharing your wisdom, Rabbi Chaim Seidler-Feller. Thank you all for joining us. We will be posting by tomorrow the sources that the rabbi was talking about. So please consult them, share them, and join us again for future Nazarian Center events. Thank you.
Thank you.